Hey ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. It's been a while. Hopefully I haven't lost my train of thought on this particular plugin, but let's continue. Now before we move on, there are a few things I noticed in my in probing the framework as a whole, and so I want to fix those a little bit in this video. So I listed them here to remember. Okay, so there are a few things that we can edit here. So let's start with this last one here. So we need to fix the auto increment, which is set to 3 in the migration class. So if I open the classes here, this is inside Thunder and no, actually it's inside models and migration. So I kept seeing this auto increment is equal to 3 in my creation for in databases. The first record was always 3, so we should remove this. This is because we copied from an existing database that had this auto increment equal to 3. So let's just remove that. Also, these settings, if you don't want InnoDB here as your engine, you can remove these as defaults, then find a way to add them, to add options for those as well. So you can actually add, let's see here, default chassis. Okay, that's fine. So we leave it at that. That one is done. So let's remove this. Okay, so the second thing is inside the migration class, it doesn't actually echo an error, because when testing this, I found that it's possible to have the wrong query when creating a database, and it won't actually tell you there's something wrong. It will just say the table was created successfully, even though the query, maybe this did not actually run. Okay, so what we could do here is just do a simple check to see if there are errors, because remember that this is extending the database class. And if we go to the database class here for a second, you will see that we have this error thingy here. So in case there's an error, if this is not empty, we should probably echo it. So what I would do is go to migration here. Now we can actually test this so that you see it. Let's see here, where are we? Maybe we can do a little test. So let me go to plugins here, and let me go ahead and try to run a migration file. Let's see, inside main menu over here, I can create a migration file here just for testing. So let's do the CMD thingy, and I want to, let me open this folder over here, our main folder. Right click, open folder. So let's grab that text and come back to our, let's change it to that. Okay, so now that we are in there, let's try and do PHP Thunder, and let's make a migration file and make it fail. So this one will go to main menu, and the migration file will be called, what we call this one? We already have menu. Let me just call it drop down. It doesn't really have to mean anything. I just want a file there. So here's the file right over here that was created. And if we check in the folder, there is this drop down class that has been generated. So this is all well and good. But now, if for example, I change something like, instead of text here, I just remove that T, maybe I forget that, or varchar here, I remove that because now it doesn't make any sense. Or maybe on default, I leave out a T for some reason, or maybe an L over here. So this query doesn't make sense anymore. So if we tried to run this, it would probably just tell us this actually worked. So let's see that in action. If I come back here and grab the file name itself and just do a copy, now I can do something like PHP Thunder and then say migrate. We are migrating from the main menu plugin, and this is the file we are migrating. So if I press enter, you will see that it tells me table dropdown created successfully, even though this is actually not true, because there's no way that table was created at all. If we even try to check our DB here, we will find that it actually isn't. So let's try and find that. This is in the plugins table. Let me see if that loads as quickly as possible. So there we go, plugin DB over here, and as you can see, there is no table named dropdown as you would expect. That's because there's something wrong here. So what I want us to do is, in the migration file here, we can tell it to display errors, and that's a simple process by simply just saying if not empty. So over here we just check if there's something inside this error, like so. Okay, so if that's not empty, then of course let's echo it. And what I'll do is we can just do echo over here, like something like this. So then we can say error creating table, and then we can remove this part over here. So error in creating that particular table, and at this point we can just return from this, because this is a function, we can say return like that, just to end things here. And let's put this inside brackets because it's more than a single line, and we do that. Okay, great. Okay, so let's try and run this again. So we just redo our query and run it. And now we say migrating file, and it says error creating table dropdown, migration complete. Maybe that migration complete is okay because you could be migrating several files at a time. You just want this particular one to fail. And then we could, error creating table, we could say something like with error, and that way we actually show the error that happened, and we can of course grab that error from this error over here and put it there like so. Okay, so let's save that and come back, and let's rerun our query one more time, and here we go. So now we say error creating table dropdown with error, and then you see syntax error, access violation. You have an error in your syntax, SQL syntax. Check the manual, and it says near. So you see here where it says to use the right syntax, to use near. The moment you see that part, it means this is the beginning of where the problems start. So there's this part with 255 no, and then column 2. Okay, so that's a giveaway on what part is wrong with this. So column 2, and before it, just before 255, which is here, right there, because we are missing an R there. And if we try this again, we'll see to show us the next part here, which is an error. So if I try to run that, you see again it will say near no deleted tiny int. So where is that? That's no deleted tiny int. So there's a missing excuse me, there's missing text over here. So this is one way to do it. So let me delete this migration file we created because we don't need it. This is one problem solved there. That's great. So let's remove that as well. Now check for invalid JSON files when loading plugins. So this is something else that I did not take into account. So let's go and fix that. So if we go to functions over here, okay, let's try and notice what kind of plugins are being loaded. So for now, let me go down to where it says show plugins. There is a function here called show plugins, which will show the plugins that are loaded on a very specific page, or whatever particular page you're on. Now you can run this function anywhere, so I could just as easily run it here, like so, or you could run it in any of the plugins, and the irony of that is that that plugin may not be loaded at the time. So usually I just run it from here. So what will happen now is if I refresh, okay, where is that? 87. There's a problem. Wait. Oh, so I actually never. Interesting enough, right? So it's saying, so this brings us another error, trying to access offset of a null. Okay, so it's saying this is empty at this point. So what we'll do is we'll do this and do that to solve that problem. So if it does not exist, it should be represented by an empty array instead. So there we go. So it has emptiness. So I guess this is the wrong place to show this because plugins haven't loaded yet. So I think the best place to load this is in the index page, where you can actually do it after plugins have been loaded. So before the app actually starts, but you know plugins have been loaded at this point, then you can try it over here to see what plugins are loaded. So as you can see here, there is basic authentication, header, homepage, etc. So let's try and get rid of the main menu. Now I'm going to do this by just going to the main menu plugin that we're working on right now and going to the config.json file. And over here, I just want to create invalid JSON. So for example, I may put a comma at the end over here, or just remove the comma that is supposed to be here. So it shows you that this is invalid JSON, but not all the time. Sometimes you don't get that. You may not see that you've created invalid JSON. So if I now refresh, you see that the main menu is actually gone, but I don't get a message of any kind to tell me why. So you may go crazy just trying to find out why didn't that plugin actually load here. And that's because the JSON is invalid. That is the same thing, I guess, if you add an extra comma at one of the ends here, but I'm not sure about that. Yeah, actually that works as well. So you see now, just that comma, you don't see an error message here or anything, or something, some red text to show you that you're doing something wrong, but you are. So if I remove that comma, now I will get that thing here. So what I want is for it to tell us that the JSON file is invalid. So we can do this by going to functions. There is somewhere where we load plugins. And by the way, I didn't need to do the show plugins because the plugin just disappeared. So we can remove that from our index page. All right, so back to functions where we say load plugins here. Let me go down to, there is this place here. Where is this? 1 second. Missing plugin dependency. Okay, that's great. But before that, we have. Wait. Okay, so there's this part that shows active, right? Okay. Now, this is the part where if the file is valid, then it's loaded as part of the list. So we convert the JSON here at this point. Now, if there's something wrong, if this is an object and there's an ID there, things do run. Otherwise, let's put an else statement here. So I'm going to do else right here, like so. And then in this case, we'll use the DD over here to give us an error message, and we're going to say something like invalid JSON file in plugin, and then we will try and figure out. In fact, we don't even need to mention the name of the plugin because at this point we actually don't know what this plugin is named because we couldn't read the JSON file. So we'll just say invalid JSON file and then just concatenate the actual file name which is saved inside the file variable, like so. So let me come back here and let's refresh. And there it is. It says invalid JSON file inside plugins main menu config.json. So at least now you get an idea of why the plugin did not load at all. So that solves one problem. So let's remove that. Now there we can make the get plugin folders more efficient. So there is a get plugins wait, what is it called? Get plugin folders. Yes. So there's this get plugin dir. Is it? No, this is not the one I'm looking for. There's another function called get plugin folders. This is one right here. So get plugin folders. We probably use this only once. Well, this is wait a minute. Get plugin folders. How are we not reusing this? This is very strange. Okay, so from here we get plugin folders, load plugins. Where is load plugins code from though? Get plugin folders. So I guess this is only loaded inside the index.php. Let me see that. So it's loaded here. Load plugins. Wait a minute. There was a reason why I thought this should be optimized, because interesting. There's this part where we ask if a plugin exists, right? Okay. So there's another issue here that I've noticed that probably I didn't put here. Yeah. Okay, so plugin exists has a problem. So let me show you this problem here. Let's go to, let's see here. We have basic admin, right? For example, as a plugin. So let's say I want to check if basic plugin exists. Let me go to the index page and do it right over here, where after the plugins have been loaded. So we're gonna do var dump like this, because it shows us the data type as well. And then I want to run the get plugins folder. So function, sorry, plugin exists actually. So plugin exists, and in there I want to do basic admin, because I know that plugin does exist. So let's go back here, and I'm going to refresh this. But you see here it tells me this does not exist. It's false. What about, let me fix the main menu JSON file so that the main menu will load. Now I will close that. Let's come back here and refresh so we don't get that invalid file. So I know main menu exists, right? So let's check that out. Let's say main menu over here. Something like that. Okay, so there we go. It actually brings back something. So that's good. But why is it that basic admin tells us it does not exist? Now check this out. So if I ask for basic admin here, essentially it does not exist. But if I do happen to go to, let me try and log in here. Let's say email, and then let's go inside password. And let me go to the admin page. You see that now it actually tells me it exists. And the reason is that it only checks if a plugin exists only when it's loaded. So which is not right, because we need to know even for those that have not been actually loaded, on that particular page, we should know if they exist or not. So we need to change this as well. So I'll leave that thing there so that it shows us when things are good. So here we have this IDs is equal to array, and then we have app plugins, and then we get the IDs from there. So what I want us to do instead of getting app plugins here, what I want to do is use the get plugin folders function here, because this one brings me back all the folders of all the plugins that exist, right? That way, I can check one by one to see what's going on. Now, since we will be calling this a few times, because here it was okay like this, because we are only calling it once every page request, but now there's a possibility that in our code we'll be asking if plugin exists, do this and that, and every time we, where is this valid route? Wait a minute. There's this if plugin exists, which is inside a for each loop, right? So this is inside a loop of a loop. So which means we're going to be asking if a plugin exists quite a number of times, okay? So now imagine every time we have to get to the file system and grab the names of the folders. This takes quite a bit because there's codeigniter there going on. So what I want to do instead is, let's get that global value app. And what I'm going to do is ask the question if not empty, right? Or let's say if empty. Let's start with that. If empty app. Now empty also checks if the variable exists first. That's why I use this quite a bit. So if empty, let's say all plugin folders or something, I don't know, all plugin folders, right? If that is empty, then we're going to run this codeigniter. Okay, so we will do this process right here if that is empty. But if it isn't empty and it contains something, let's just return it because it already contains what we want. So at this point, we'll say else, then let's return this guy instead. Okay, so result is here, right? And wait a minute. Actually, we don't need an else here. What we can do is this, like so, and then this could be a potentially hazardous situation, but because I want to just move this up like this, hopefully, because when coding here you have to keep in mind, try and see how this could fail so you can write better code. Okay, so if this is empty, then we will grab all of these and then return that. But before we return this, we have to actually add something to this here. So I'm going to do this and say this is equal to the result that we got over here. All right. So what will happen is the first time, obviously, we run this function, this will be empty. Okay. So it will run through here and grab all the folders. And then once it's done, the result we're going to add to this and then return that result. That way we never get here. But on the second trip that we come here, this will not be empty. It will have all the names of the folders already, and so we will go straight into returning that same value. This makes this function more efficient because there's only once, we're going to only read once per request on the hard drive. Okay, so that gets that out of the way, but there's now the question of the plugin exists doesn't work as intended. So let's go down here again to plugin exists and fix this problem. So we grab this global app thingy and let's do this. Let's just say folders is equal to, this is not what I want, it's the get plugin folders function that I want to call here. So that one will get me the plugin folders that I want. So instead of having these app plugins over here, I have folders in there. Okay, so once I grab the folders, all I need to do is go through those folders, just much in the same way. Sort plugins. We don't need to sort anything because we just want, let me grab this. Okay, so now it's possible that this may not exist for some reason. I don't know, for some weird reason. Maybe yeah, if it doesn't exist, it always, or if it's empty, it always pass through here. And this could be an empty, so I think we are fine there. So let me come back here. Okay, so with all these folders here, all we need to do is do an array column of, those are just folders, and we want to know that the contents in those folders are valid. So we want to loop through those folders. So I'm going to grab this and let's do this through here. Okay, so we go through folders like this as a folder. Now for each folder, we want to look for the JSON file, and we will do that. I'm just so lazy, I just want to copy what I already did here. We have this file here that we create, so the JSON file, this one right here. So blah, and then we check if the file exists in there, the JSON file. Wait, file exists. Yes, if it does, we grab the JSON, and if there's an ID, then it's valid. So let me grab this up to there. So copy that. Now we don't care whether the plugin is active or not, it just needs to exist. Or maybe that's a thing you should care about, right? Maybe if it's active or not. So let's make that happen as well. I'm going to copy that if statement as well. So let's come down here, plugin exists. Let's paste over here and do this, do that to match all the brackets. Okay, so within that folder, we grab a file and then we concatenate that. If file exists, wait a minute, what am I doing? So these folders, yes, blah blah blah. So what I want here is just to say plugins like this, right, is equal to empty, like so. Alright, so what we're trying to do here is load all plugins regardless whether they are loaded on that particular page or not. So what I'm going to do is copy this and put it over here. So we'll add this to the list. For as long as the JSON data is valid, then we are going to add the JSON data there. Now, since there's only one line in this if statement, I'm going to remove the curly braces like that. Okay, that was fine. Okay, so same thing here. There's only one if one statement inside here, I guess. So you could just do this as well here, like so. Okay, so if object, then there's another if statement, and so on. I hope this actually works as it should. So now we have plugins here that have JSON data, but we can grab IDs from there, I guess, by putting this here instead. So put that there instead, and then we grab IDs, and that should do the trick. So let's see that in action. If I refresh, now it tells me that that plugin actually exists. And this is, wait a minute, what is going on here? Name, header, footer. Okay, wait a minute, this seems to be the wrong information. This seems to be the wrong information we are getting here. So let me just confirm what we are doing here. So var dump plugin exists. Let me do a dd instead. That's much clearer usually. So if I refresh, this is the data that we get, which is not right actually. So maybe I did something wrong here. Let me try and bring back the curly braces here. Maybe that was the trigger. Let's see here. Okay, so maybe not. That isn't the problem. Okay, so array search here, if key is not equal to false. Okay, so this is where the issue is, I guess. I'm using the wrong variable here. I should make sure I am using this one here, like so. Okay, good. All right, I think that should bring up the right. It should be the admin plugin here, and there we go. We get the admin plugin. Okay, so things are working as intended. So I can now remove this part here in the index.php for testing. Okay, great. So this is awesome. So let me refresh, and everything is back to normal. So now we need to fix one more thing. So efficiency, we are done. Now we have dependency issues here, but this takes a bit longer. So let's try and do the simpler stuff first. So I'm going to look at removing the quality settings for PNG on the image class. So here the issue is that if you remember, when we're creating this image class, we had set some quality settings down here when saving the images. I wasn't very sure what's going on here, but it turns out the image PNG, the quality settings only go from 1, is it from 0 to 9? I think it's probably from 0 to 9. I think like 10 is, I don't know if it's 10 or 1 as the highest. So this could translate to 0.9 instead. So it gives an error when you try and use PNG. So you can test that on your own, and it will give you that error and tell you what the limit is over here. But in my case, I just want to remove both of these because I'm not really sure of the numbers. You can try, let's leave the JPEG one there, but the rest of these should go down. Let's do the same for this other function as well. So remove this on PNG and on WebP. So I only discovered this when I tried to use this at some point, and it told me the settings value here for PNG goes beyond the limit, which I think the limit is 1. I think it's 0 to 1. Okay, so that is done. Let's close that and remove that. So we have 2 more things remaining. Let's fix the dependency issues. So let me explain what the dependency issues are here. So let's say, for example, we have this main menu. I think this is the same issue with plugin exists, right? So now that we fixed that, this should go over a little better. So this, let's say, for example, if main menu depends on the admin, the basic admin plugin. So we say this is a dependency, and it depends on version 1.0.0. Or let's just put it at version 2, something like this. Or let's put it at 1 for now. We're going to change that in a minute. Now we know basic admin actually exists with this exact version here because we have it here. And that's its version right there. So it depends on this, but look what happens when we try to load this. Oh, it actually works. Wait a minute, what is going on here? Dependency. Okay, so let's go to functions. Let's look at where we are loading plugins here. So we're not checking for dependency issues at all. So let's try and, okay, so we have dependencies is equal to dependency there, And let's go down here and see. Oh, we do actually check for dependencies here. Okay, plugin exists. Missing plugin dependency. Okay, so all this should work now. I guess it works now because we fixed the other issue. So there were two issues here. Dependencies weren't working as they should because plugin exists wasn't working well. So it wouldn't tell if the plugin exists if it's not loaded on that particular page. So I guess that problem has sorted itself out. Okay, so we remove that. That's great. Now we go to the final problem, which is string to URL in main model. So we want to create a function like this in the main model. So what I'll do is let's go to model here and let's go down at the end here. We'll create a public function. Now the reason we're putting this function inside model is because we want every single model class to be able to access this function, and that's why we are putting it in here. We could put it inside the DB class. That's an option because sometimes you do not want to use a particular model, you just want to use an actual the database class directly. So you may want to have that function available even then. So something we put in the database class will also be available in the model. So maybe we should put it in the DB class. Now the significance of this function is that what it does is, let me put here and say public function string to URL, and let's put a string over here. Now instead of all this, I'm just going to copy the code that I already have. Now to explain what this function is for, let's say you are creating a table with posts, for example. So you may want to get the title of the post and use that as a unique identifier for your particular post. And the reason you might want to do that is because in your URL, for example, let's say you have a website and it says www.mywebsite.com, something like this, and then slash, there is post, because this is a post. And then let's say you're using IDs instead to load your posts. So maybe this is post number 56. So your URL will look something like this. Now this is fine. Now the problem is, if somebody's just looking at this URL, they will not know what this post is about. However, if you had another URL that said something like post, then this one has something like man arrested for murder or something like this. Okay, so this one is more descriptive of a post here because you can clearly see the headline over here as part of the URL. Now the advantage of this over that is that when Google is indexing your website, if somebody is searching for this particular topic, once they type, Google will know this URL is probably talking about that, and so this will rank higher on Google searches than this particular one, because this is very ambiguous. We don't know what this is for, but this one we can take a wild guess to see what the post is about. At least we know the title. So now what this function does is that it gets whatever post you create or whatever text you want and converts it to a more friendly URL version, because there are characters in the URL you just can't put, like spaces, for example, are not recommended in the URL, and slashes, for example, because if you put a slash here, it means something totally different. It means this is one post slug and this is a different folder, for example. So you can't put this, and these need to be escaped or removed entirely to suit your needs. So this function will clean up whatever string you put in there and make it more URL friendly so that we can use it as what is known as a slug for our posts or user accounts, depending on how you want to run this. Because if you're using if this is a social website, it's still not recommended to use IDs for profile URLs, it's better to use the name of the user like this, or like that instead. Okay, so that way somebody knows this is their profile just by looking at the URL. Alright, so let me just copy some text and paste that I already created for this particular function. Alright, actually I'm debating here whether to add this in this particular function, or in this particular class, or this one. Okay, so what you could do is just test it and see when in a real world setting which it makes sense the most. But I think let's put it inside the model, because usually we're going to need it only when we are dealing with the model. So this is the code right here. A little explanation of what it's used for, but this is the code right here. So let me just zoom it in a little bit so that you can see what's going on, and let me explain. So we grab a URL string here from this function and we expect it to return a string. Then we have URL here. You can call this anything, probably string. Maybe string makes more sense, I don't know. We'll leave it as URL, it's fine. Doesn't matter what we call it. So we grab the supplied string, and what we do is we remove all single quotes from there. So we're just replacing any single quote with emptiness. And then here we are removing anything that is non-numerical, because here we it says if you put a caret inside a bracket like this, whatever you put in here is what you want. Anything that is not this will be matched, and that will be replaced by a dash. So anything that isn't alphanumeric is going to be replaced by a dash. And then there will be certain times when maybe the characters you had replaced were at the end, then you're going to have a trailing dash like this one, or a leading dash. So we trim those to remove those trailing and leading dashes. So a dash at the end and the beginning of the string, we remove that. Of course, we convert these to UTF-8 characters, and then we convert them to lowercase finally. And then here we just make sure one more time that we're just matching letters A to Z plus the dashes themselves, or underscores if they are there. And yeah, that's what we are doing. Anything that isn't part of this list is removed, replaced with emptiness. And by the end of that, you should have a string that is URL friendly enough. Now, of course, depending on where you live, your kind of language, you could convert this function to suit your needs as you wish. So for me, this works very well. I've used it for a very long time. So now I just copy and paste it from other projects. All right, so there we go. This solves all the problems that I wanted us to solve in this particular project. Hopefully you managed to follow along without any problems, and if that is all, let me actually remove this dependency here. Main menu. Oh, it actually does depend on the admin, so I'll leave that there. Okay guys, alright, so I think we've solved all our problems, so I'll see you guys in the next video where we continue to make our main menu.